Welcome, everybody, to the Artisan Church All-Inclusive Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Josephus.
And I'm Reed Conley.
And today we are here to talk about conflict and reconciliation. This is going to be a fun topic.
I thought it would be fun. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely something that I think, people shy away from, talking about, because when you're in church, oftentimes you only want to hear about the good. And, real life happens in church too.
It's true. So it's helpful to talk about it sometimes when you don't need to.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then you have some tools or framework to think about when you do need it. So
why don't you kick us off?
We are jumping right in to the fire right now.
Yeah.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm feeling very lawyerly today, because I feel like there's going to be some defensiveness in this pocket. No, I'm just playing. I'm just picking. No, I'm feeling confident that we're going to have a good podcast, though.
Okay.
Everything is everything.
I think I'll just start with the first question. What is a conflict that you've had with an individual at church or community organization that has had to be worked out? Something that you've been involved in with an individual, maybe, and it just was an impasse. Maybe it was just something that was a roadblock and you had to work through it. I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead. Kick us off.
I'll go first. This question made me think about a time that I was a new parent and my kids started going to Sunday school. And, that was a step in itself to like trust somebody with your kid. And so just thinking in terms of a conflict at church, our kid goes to Sunday school, has a decent time on Sunday morning, and then comes home with, this might have been the second or third time that they'd been to this program, comes home with a coloring sheet that says, Judas hanged himself, and it's a picture to color for kids.
Wow.
And I thought, well, this is a conversation that we haven't had yet with our 5-year-old. So that'll be interesting. And Rich is holding back a laugh right now.
How do you transition from here's Barney to here's Judas and he hanged himself?
Right. I know. I was just, jaw drop. Like, what do you...
Wait, you guys didn't talk about hanging when you were like 4 or 5 years old? That's crazy.
No, anyway. So the conflict came when I approached someone and said, why does my kid have this? Why wasn't I, consulted about this? And do you think this is age appropriate? And then I was kind of blown off. I was kind of like, yeah. Sorry, you don't like it. It was like that. And so I was still, that, did not make me feel better. So I kind of went up the chain. I'm like, I'm going to talk to your supervisor. And then that person kind of was kinder, but still, well, this is just what we do. This is not, I'm sorry you don't like it. But that ticked me off. I got under my skin and I carried that around for a long time. Yeah. So I don't know if this is the best example because the resolution didn't.
Yeah. What did you do?
I think it's a great example because the resolution isn't always going to be one that is what you makes you feel rainbows and butterflies. Like, I think that was actually a really good example because, you had a problem, you confronted the problem, and you realized that the solution might be like, okay, is this the church for me, or is this the they gave you a direct answer and it just wasn't one that you particularly wanted to hear. So
I guess that's it. The conflict, it didn't have a clean ending, and maybe that's just like people in life.
When you actually think about movies that have like kind of had these like, rave reviews or the like, won a ton of awards, a lot of times the reason they do have those rewards is because they surprised everybody with the ending not being what you expected. I mean, look at the Titanic, you know.
Right.
I mean, you expected it to sink, but when you see how big the door was, Jack could fit. I mean, it's been scientifically proven already. Like, I mean, that was a part of the ending that no one expected. It was like, wow, man.
So that's a good segue, because I think that when we talk about conflict, it's important to sort of define what makes us feel the way that we feel in conflict. And really, if you think about it, every time that we talk about conflict or conflict resolution, it's about our expectations. When our expectations for any kind of situation aren't met, that's when we start to feel anger or frustration. It happens on the road. It happens at the store if someone's rude to you, because you're expecting them to act a certain way. And so maybe, you were expecting or weren't expecting that particular coloring, kind of assignment as a much more mature subject matter that might be addressed on a family level or in a different context, and to have to see it come home as a sort of a, wow, I wasn't expecting that in this scenario. So that's what sort of gets us into the conflict mode.
To play devil's advocate a little bit on this one, I can understand the shock on that, but what if she would have just colored Jesus on the cross? I mean, that's a pretty gruesome image, but you actually see it in churches all the time. I mean, like, you can walk into a church and they will literally have a crucified Jesus like hanging there. So it's like we see Jesus crucified all around us a lot of times. And I think some would even say it's surprising that you found that picture horrifying, but yet you've probably seen Jesus crucified so many times and never thought twice about it.
That's true. I mean, we've kind of normalized the cross in a lot of ways at church, and you're right. You see it, you don't think about it. That's a story that's taught from the very beginning, and I think that in the Bible, there's just tons of stories that are awful and horrible to process and understand. I mean, we even the Noah story.
Shout out to Job.
Job. I mean, that's a tough one, but we can. I guess we're more prepared for some of those stories, and this one is a lesser celebrated tale. So
right,
and there's the idea of killing yourself that we had to kind of talk about. Like, that's a possibility. Okay, yeah.
Right, and like I said, it was more so as a parent. I definitely agree with you. Like,
yeah,
it would just been something I would have wanted to be more prepared for, but also as a critical thinker, I also also think about, well, I mean, we do see Jesus crucified everywhere. Is it really that much more extreme to see somebody hanging? And while I think they're both extreme, I just think, like you said, we've normalized one thing, and it kind of, I think for me, I think the conflict you said in community, I looked at it recently. The elementary school introduced this new thing where they just introduce the LGBTQ kind of topic into the school, like, without even sending home a permission slip. Like, they just actually tell you, hey, we talked about this today. That's the letter we got home. And I'm not against anybody's right to do anything, or I don't have an opinion, but my thing is, at the same time, sort of like yours, I want to be prepared to have the conversation with my son about a transsexual or about that kind of lifestyle when the time is right. I don't know if elementary school for me.
So they let you know after the fact instead of ahead of time.
And it's elementary school. I don't know elementary school kids that are really having those kinds of conversations on their own that aren't influenced. And I don't know if maybe the tactic is to, start them when they're not thinking about it. So when they get to the ages that they do, it's more normalized. But it just, as a parent, I want my kids coloring and trying to figure out how to color in the lines, writing their ABCs, maybe even learning cursive. I mean, that is still useful.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a child psychologist, and I don't know, but we've got people listening to this who probably have lots of different opinions about that topic. And so to hear it might be like a hot button issue, but I think in this case, it's more probably about the communication.
Right. That's what I said.
From
I said it was
teachers
literally
to parents.
the communication.
If you're doing this, then it'd be that's great that you thought to send one after, but maybe one before would have been helpful.
To put it in retrospect, it'd be like them talking about marijuana. I mean, some people have differences of opinion on how marijuana is viewed nowadays, but if they just decided to talk about it willy-nilly and didn't give the parents a heads up, like, hey, this
they probably already talked about that.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, but I'm just saying, like, in elementary school, I don't know if they talked about it in elementary
I don't
school.
know.
But yeah, like...
Well, these are issues also that as a country, as a nation, we're still working through.
Right.
So sometimes, curricula, if it gets implemented too soon, because it's in the public eye, because it's something that's important to us as a nation or as a people, if it gets implemented too soon, it might be still too soon. That doesn't mean that it's wrong or that there's anything wrong with teaching it, but until we as a nation decide exactly how this is going to be addressed, sometimes you can be jumping the shark, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. It's not about the topic being discussed. I mean, I think education on that topic is very important. I do think you're going to encounter that. I think we didn't have enough of it when we were growing up. So I don't disapprove of educating the children about that community. I just disapprove on not at least informing the parents that, hey, this is going to be something. And if you wanted to opt out, or if you wanted to, have, your kid not be a part of that, you had that option, because at the end of the day, they are your children.
I think it kind of goes back to something that Rich was saying earlier about your expectations and your feelings and how you feel about a certain subject. Like, clearly this is a hot button, front page kind of topic in a lot of states and in a lot of news outlets about what we teach our kids, not just LGBTQ, but about
critical race theory,
race theory, stuff like. And so all these things come to a head, and it's not because, in my mind, it's not necessarily because it's the most important thing, but it's about what people feel and about what people are deciding that their expectations are not being met on one side or the other of this topic. And in my mind, we should be talking about how do we pay our teachers more?
Right.
How do we fix schools that are falling down? How do we address the child poverty and hungry kids problems? Like, those seem like way more important than spending so much time and energy on this. But I'll digress and say, just it's more about like my inner workings of what I'm thinking and feeling about these subjects that create that conflict where I'm ready to step up or take a stand for something, than it is almost, what's the most important thing.
I think you also have to look at when do they actually start teaching health or about sex. It's not in elementary school. It's actually in middle school, and towards you start taking health when you have PE and you're learning about the changes in your body. So I think, I think I would have been more prepared for. I think the expectation is introduce it when sex would be the topic, and that would be a little bit more appropriate than kids who aren't actually even thinking about that subject to begin with. You get what I'm saying? The expectation is not based on.
You might be surprised though, and I'm not an expert, but you might be surprised how early kids are going through those kind of life changes.
Right.
I know kids who have had puberty, in elementary school, and
conspiracy theory. It's all the hormones in the cow milk.
Yes.
I was literally thinking that. I didn't know.
Why isn't that in the news?
I know, man.
So wait a minute. Maybe to redirect back to the whole conflict and the church. And the past week's sermon was all about how conflict is a relationship issue. It's expectations, like we talked about earlier, but it's also a relationship issue between people. And, we, for good, bad, or other, as a populace, a world, we have kind of regressed from the ability to sit down with each other and talk face to face in a calm manner, in a loving manner, in a Christ-like manner, if I can use that, to bring that to the issue without people immediately becoming defensive or not knowing, having the skill set. That sounds judgmental, but without having the ability to really do it in a calm and measured manner.
I think me and Rich have a lot of these conversations, and it's a pleasure once you do find somebody who's able to really talk. And I don't know how many, I don't hardly agree with anybody.
Certainly not me.
No, I'm just picking. I like to argue the opposing sides to a lot of things. I approach a lot of conversations with debate. Even if I agree with a certain viewpoint, I like having somebody to bounce other ideas, because I like to try to see things from multiple viewpoints. I mean, it's a part of my character that some people think I lack, but I really do like to see things from all sides to
Yeah. Okay, so as a follower of Christ,
well, look, but
Nice,
no,
nice.
what Rich was actually just talking about. I was actually trying to tie this into that, but what Rich was just actually talking about, I think it's interesting too, because it does cause people to also feel like they have to explain, or try to avoid just having that conversation. I noticed that you were very well, let's it felt like backpedalish, to not, misrepresent anything. And I understand it in the time that we live in, so it's not, offensive to me, but it's sad that we just really can't talk about something without somebody feeling like there needs to be a retreat clause. But I understand why you have to do that.
I think that as someone who wants to follow Christ, that we can have a sensitivity when we're talking about subjects so that we can have the conversation. Because when I come to someone who's in conflict, they are on edge and they're walking a tightrope of all sorts of emotions that I don't even know about. So I think coming to the table and saying, I understand your side of the story, that sounds like a very basic idea. But to say, I understand that there are sensibilities that I don't grasp and that I don't share. And if we start with that footing, I think we're going to get a lot farther towards reconciliation, if that's the goal. If it's to fight indefinitely until there's blood and somebody, whimpers and goes away, well, that's a different story. But if the goal, which I think Christ leads us towards, the goal is reconciliation and forgiveness. And yes, somebody is going to have to compromise, but reconciliation. Let's go to that. So let me use all the tools I have at my disposal to do that. Because being at peace and at one with that person and that person's community is going to be more valuable to me than being right, if I'm following Jesus. Done. All right.
Very
Lock
churchy
it up.
answer.
That's all I had to say today. It's all going downhill from here.
No, it's good. We're having good banter.
But so we're talking about in Matthew these verses where there's two people at odds. What do we do? What are we called to do as the church and as followers of Jesus? And the verses say this, 18 verse 16 in the Gospel of Matthew. But if you're not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of two or three witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. So this is something that it depicts a way of engaging with conflict that's different from the way we talk about conflict in life, just in our social life, in our political life, or whatever. So it says to bring others to help the resolve, and even to the point of bringing in a church community into the conversation. That's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, because most of the time you try not to bring others into your conflict with someone else.
Right. This is just between me and you.
Our
We're going to
business
duke
is
it
our
out.
business.
Right, yeah. So what do you think that says about the people who are affected and how many people are affected
Well, I think
when someone's hurt.
I think it's interesting because I think the idea of not including other people and getting away from this practice came from when you bring others into the problem, you're giving them a choice to choose the side that they want to take. And maybe it's not your intention. Maybe it's like, hey, I want an unbiased opinion, but you know, for example, it depends on who the witness is. If I tell my mom my side of the story, there's a parental bias there that the opposing party is going to be subjected to. So I think a lot of times now we've gotten away from this is because how do we bring others into the conflict without them choosing a side based on anything other than the facts? How do we ensure that, hey, if I tell my two friends to come confront you, you feel like, okay, well, they're unbiased because they're gonna they're gonna side with
They're going to
whoever.
be on your side.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difficulty with nowadays how people view this particular scripture is how I would analyze it. So
Especially when we are divided on so many
right.
topics to the point where it's hard to talk about anything or have discourse about anything.
I like,
but
the
this
little
is
part
personal,
here.
right? This is like for a personal conflict.
So can I just get an interpretation here? Because how I interpret this, it says treat him as a Gentile or a tax collector. I don't want to see my tax collector but maybe once a year. Is it saying if you've tried all this other stuff, at this point you still do what you have to and have very limited exposure? Or is...
I think it's sort of like that. On its face, Gentiles and tax collectors are outsiders to the church because someone who is following the teaching and lessons of Jesus is probably not going to take the career tax collector because it's doing the opposite of caring for the least of these.
Except for Matthew.
It gets a little confusing. I'm not sure what his career was afterwards, but I think he was probably became a preacher or something. At least wrote some things. But I think so. Gentile and tax collector are outsiders, but there's another side to it that Jesus really deeply cared for Gentiles, people on the outside. He went out of his way, and he had friends who were tax collectors. For example, Matthew and Zacchaeus. So it doesn't mean I don't care about that person anymore. It doesn't mean I don't long to be in community with that person anymore. It means you're at an impasse.
Limit your exposure.
Yeah.
That's how I took it. It's like it doesn't say cut them out of your life. But it says treat them like you would a Gentile or a tax collector. Like I said, we treat tax collectors like we see you maybe once a year.
Yeah. But
so
I think what came to me as I studied this more is like it's less about I come to you with my problem. It's less about my decision to keep them at arm's length and more about their decision to just be on the outside. Like their choice to be on. I still want to heal this thing and go. I want to be on this Jesus way together with you, but it's not going to work out, at least for now.
So there's another interesting part about that particular passage. And if you look in it, the word listen is used 3 times in there. And when we talk about conflict with each other, even conversation and communication with each other, if you notice, when most people have a conversation with each other, they're not really listening to what the other person says. Most people are thinking about what they're going to say the next time they have an opportunity to speak. And listening is so important on both sides. For the person that you want to bring back into the fold, it's important for them to be able to listen. And for you, as someone who's trying to offer this olive branch and offer this in love to bring them back into a loving relationship with the church or whatever your conflict is, it's important that all of us are willing to listen from a position of an open mind and address it that way.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And it speaks to this sort of approaching it with humility and with seeing the other side. Like that is an emphasis here. If we aren't doing that, then we're really not. We're not in it for being whole again.
Yeah, it kind of reduces the flexibility that you have because you're already approaching it from a framework maybe of judgmental, maybe I'm at an impasse with the way that I can reconcile this with myself. But sometimes, and this is talking specifically about bringing someone into line with the way to being a disciple for Christ. But we have to sort of look at that within the context of these conversations and these relationships and everything, that we all have to be able to listen to each other first, and then the approach of, I'm not giving up on you, but maybe you need some extra time and you need to be on the outside right now, because there's just no way that we can't reach this together, but I'm still here for you if you need me.
And I think even that, like, I'm not giving up on you, like, makes it also come off as like, I know you're wrong, but like that's what some people hear. Like that's what, like, I know you, I know you can't see that you're wrong yet, so I'm gonna be over here whenever you're ready.
How about I'm not giving up on us?
No, yeah, like, but it's just, even if you say it like that, it's I've been on that side, and I've also been on the other side. Like, I can admit that, hey, there was a time where I wasn't ready to take ownership for what I was doing, and it just put me in a position to be like, well, with that statement, you're saying that you're right and I'm wrong.
And the hope is that it's not about me being right. It's about, God's will being right. It's about Jesus's way being right. That everything points towards loving others and loving God. And so if I betray you, or if I steal from you, if I lie to you, if I commit adultery, or if I, the list goes on and on of all of the things, if I disrespect you, if I hold back from you, or all of those things, at its core, we should be able to come to consensus, hopefully, in a community of faith, about what is pointing to God's love and what is not.
Which is why maybe they have the passage talks about bringing in a witness, bringing in multiple witnesses, and then involving the church. Because if the church, as a community of Christ followers, agrees, as a body that is trying to be in this discipleship role, then if the person that they're addressing is still unwilling to listen, then that's the problem.
And it's interesting, listening, it doesn't necessarily mean it's resolved either, does
No.
it? It doesn't mean that, I'm backing down and repenting and I'm back on your side. No, it doesn't. It's like, it's a process, because it's messy and dirty. And
well, you got to think too, bringing the church in, like, if you bring one or two in, there's still a level of bias. But if you bring the whole church in, like, the more people you add to a discussion or a conflict, and they hear a side. I mean, we do it with juries all the time. You have this, like, even if there is a partial bias because of someone's history or whatever with the individual,
we all have bias,
right?
yeah, right.
Even the likelihood that every single person has the same bias towards that particular conflict, it becomes harder to rationalize. Like, hey, everybody sees it the same way, but you. Are you sure this is?
Yeah, which takes a lot of energy,
right?
Work, and that's going to be
and I think
difficult.
That's why it's worded the way it is because, like, okay, if one or two can't get it through, what about in the whole church can't get it through? At that point, is this person really ready to heal? Because there's something there that's blocking that healing, and we know it's not, the whole group or the collective. And I mean, for the one person out there where the whole collective was against them, it does happen. There are outliers to every situation. But the likelihood that an entire faction would be against one person is...
Unless you're a wacko cult.
Right. Exactly.
But again, I think the hope in the best sense of the community is that it's not against that person, but it's against how that person is not living into who they really are called to be, or who God really made them to be. And so you go through all of that work and effort, if it comes to it, to draw in other people and other voices, because they're worth it, right? It's worth it to keep the community together, because everyone is connected. And if we lose someone, if we lose someone, we're all going to feel it in one way or another. There's going to be some lingering hurt that ripples through.
Just like the story of the shepherd leaving the 99 for the one. I mean, we should make every effort to be all inclusive.
Because it is bigger than just like, I mean, we say it like all the time when it comes to death, even one life is too much in certain circumstances, right? Like, we're not gonna, if someone came in and said, trade this person for the lives of everybody here, that's, even that one person is, too much. If somebody said, "Hey, we can give one person,"
not on Star Trek, buddy.
There's
always somebody to lose on Star Trek.
What's crazy is like we've already had that, and look at where it's gotten us. Jesus was that one person that was supposed to be sacrificed for everything, and we still have conflict about it. So it just goes to show, even one person sacrifice is just way too much. And who knows how much more good could have come from Christ living. We know that wasn't the plan, but think about a man or, God in human form, what that would have been for
that he would die
years. I mean,
is that what you mean?
No, I mean, just in general, like all the other miracles, all the people he could have saved, all the people.
To keep on keeping on.
Just to keep on, 10,000-year-old Jesus just walking around.
Yeah, but even Seinfeld knew that it's best to go out on top.
Right. That's a good one. So in the same passage, Jesus talks about praying together, united in what you ask for, and then says, whenever two or more are gathered, Jesus is present. What do you think he wanted to make the disciples and us feel about that?
What do I think about that? I think it goes back to us being intertwined and connected and doing this thing in community. And the fact that Jesus says it only takes two means that every size community matters as well. So I think that God wants us to be together and wants more than ever to be with us in it.
I think the praying part is the key for me on this one. Is like, even if you go and you add 2-3 people or the whole community, it still might not be solved. But there's one more avenue that is even more powerful than that, and that is the prayer, and adding God to that equation. Because sometimes through your prayer you come to a revelation on, hey, maybe I am, like, hearing yourself say the conflict. Sometimes I know that's helped me. Hearing myself actually say the conflict out loud in prayer has got me to realize, like, coming out of my mouth, hearing it is like, I would think that's crazy. Like, what is going on? Like, it's an acknowledgement, and bringing God into it is what, was able to help me see it. Yeah. So I think, that passage is saying, hey, look, bring, 2 or more are gathered in prayer, you bring God into the equation, and maybe that'll also help, get you to a resolution. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but.
No, and it's never guaranteed that what we ask for in prayer we're going to actually get. That's not what this passage is talking about. It's not talking about prayers being unanswered. It's just sometimes the answer is not what we expect or what we're actually asking for in the way that we're asking for. But what we can be promised is that, as it says, Jesus will be with us no matter what. So God's presence is with us, and God's care and concern for us through those requests are going to be. That's constant,
and it's encouragement for us to be together in a community as a church. It's encouragement for us to have those relationships together.
And so it brings me to my next question. If Jesus is with everybody, then he's also with the wrong party. How does that work?
How does it work that Jesus is with the wrong party?
Like,
well, who's the wrong party?
Well, what I'm saying is, if a community agrees on a topic and you're the odd man out, Jesus is still with you, but like. That's an interesting way. That's the humanity way of thinking about things.
Sure, you got two organizations with vastly different values and views, and
right.
And they would never go together. They wouldn't sit next to each other at.
But Jesus is with both of them.
But Jesus is with both of them. Well, I think we're all just trying to figure it out, and nobody's got it all figured out, and nobody ever will. So. I don't know. Who are we to judge?
See, this is why we have to ask those questions for the people with no voice.
So Josephus is a cook. He's a at-home chef, a connoisseur of food, a foodie, if you will. And so some meals, all you have to do is sprinkle the spice on top of them, and they're ready to go right into the frying pan, and they're going to taste delicious. And some meals, you've got to rub that spice all over them and let them sit and marinate. And then, only then, will the meal become delicious or the meat becomes tender.
Shout out to the rump roast.
Yeah, shout out to the rump roast. So it might be the same sort of thing. It's not that God isn't with that person. It's that the marination has to happen. And that's sometimes how the Holy Spirit, convicts us, right?
This is why we need Rich on here. Because
we totally need Rich.
That answer, man, can we give it up for that answer? Like, that answer was spot on. I mean, he answered how God could be with both sides. And I mean, that
and we needed to talk about food a little bit too.
Well, yeah,
yes, exactly.
Absolutely. Food. I had to bring.
That was
hungry.
a great answer, Rich. Great answer.
Thank you. I'll be here all week.
Thank you for being with us and for helping us every time we do this. Rich, you're amazing. And thank you, Josephus, for bringing your wisdom and thoughts and questions. I think this topic is one that is probably going to be something we have to deal with at some point or another.
Oh, yeah.
But for today,
we dealt with it. And it's a happy ending. It's a happy ending.
Everyone enjoy rainbows and butterflies for the rest of the day.
Free rainbows and butterflies.
With the rain being like it is, we might get some rainbows out here.
Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Adios.